Right, everyone. I just want to make sure that we only now have people here who are involved in the planning committee. Thank you very much. So, good afternoon and welcome to members of the public, officers and members of the committee to South Kesteven District Council's Planning Committee today, June 29th, 2023. I am Councillor Charmaine Morgan and I will be chairing the meeting today on behalf of Councillor David Benonme, who sends his apologies. I'm not aware of any fire drill taking place today, so if the fire alarm does sound, please vacate the building via the stairs. The meeting place is outside at the front of the building. Please ensure that you have turned off your mobile phones or switched them on to silent. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded and also being live streamed via Public Eye on the South Kesteven website. Microphones, can you please make sure that they are turned off when you're not speaking? And I need to remind myself of that. So if you do want to speak, please raise your hand and I will come to you in order as soon as possible. I will give everyone a chance to speak. I am working without a vice chair as such today, so I apologise in advance if I miss you, but I will give you a chance, so don't worry. So we've got today with us our Assistant Director of Planning, Emma Whittaker, Adam Murray, our Principal Planning Officer. We have Ava Jackson, who is our legal representative, and we have Amy, who is our Democratic Services representative and who was responsible for our minutes. Thank you. So, moving on to public speakers. Public speakers, ward councillors, please be aware that you will have 3 minutes to speak and that you will be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may finish a sentence then that you're on, but you can't start another paragraph. So, I'd just like to welcome the speakers for today. Just find my list. So, we have District Ward Councillor Ian Stokes, and we also have, acting on behalf of the applicant, Agent Mark Bassett, from representing Allison Homes Limited. Thank you. Right. So we'll now move on to agenda item 1. And can I ask if we have heard any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor David Bellamy and Councillor Paul Wood, and also Councillor Phil Dilks, the Cabinet Member for Planning and Housing. Councillor Helen Crawford will be substituting for Councillor Paul Wood. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosures of interest for consideration? No. If you do think of something and we're halfway through the meeting, that is fine. Just raise your hand and we can take that into account then. Thank you. Okay, so item 3, moving on to the minutes of the meeting. First of all, we need to approve the minutes of the meeting that took place on the 1st of June. So can I ask if everybody has had a chance to read those, and are those who are present happy with those minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to propose those minutes.
Thank you very much. May we have a seconder? Thank you. So, Councillor Whittaker. And in that case, if I could just ask for those who are in favour of the minutes, if you could raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Due to our extraordinary meeting on the 15th of June, we also need to approve those minutes today. We are aware that you haven't had very long to read those. They've really only landed on the doorstep recently. Can I just check, did you all have a chance to read them? Or would you like a period of time now to have a look at them.
5 minutes, Madam Chair.
Five minutes, that's lovely. Just to bring to your attention that you will have actually received 3 papers. The minutes we need to approve today, but the local impact report for the Mallard Pass Solar Farm, that final draft, it's just for noting today. And also the written representation for the Mallard Pass Solar Farm, again, it's just for noting today. Thank you. So we'll reconvene at 15:15. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. We're now continuing with our planning meeting agenda item 4, minutes of the extraordinary meeting on the 15th of June 2023. Is everyone happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Councillor Crawford.
I'm quite happy to propose them again, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And may I have a seconder, please? Harish Bisnal Singh. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. As I stated, we did have other documents presented, but they were only to be noted because they have already gone forward at this time. Oh, sorry. May I have those in favour of the minutes, please?
That's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Do we have any abstentions? As I noticed that Councillor Smith did not raise her hand.
I wasn't at the meeting.
So you're abstaining. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to first of all thank you all who were involved in that particular meeting and any responses regarding the Mallard Pass Solar Farm. There is an opportunity for us to make further comment further down the line, and I'm just going to hand over briefly to Emma Whitaker, who is just going to explain the process to you.
Thank you. So we've essentially submitted the written representations and the local impact report that we looked at last time. And today is final deadline for the appellant to make comments on those should they wish to. We've also submitted a series of answers to questions, things like, is there a footpath here, can you show me the map, those sorts of basic questions and fundamental and important questions. What we've got next coming up on the schedule is we've got some hearing dates. They're going to be arranged by specific topics, and they're week commencing the 10th of July, and there'll be further hearing dates moving forwards. We're going to have further opportunities to look at written the draft development consent order, which is effective with permission, the legal agreement, and we'll have opportunities to look at statements of common ground, where we're narrowing the issues to help the inspector so that he can focus on the key points and the real sort of interesting bits that we don't agree with the appellants, or Rutland doesn't, or Lincolnshire, or whoever else is taking part in this. So anybody that's registered to speak, and I believe some of our parish and town councils have, they will be invited to those sessions as well, and they can make representations should they wish to do so. So we'll keep everybody updated as we move through those, but I think we've got a slight pause until we have those hearing dates, and then we'll get a better flavour for what happens next. The timetable was, I believe, shared with the papers last time as well, but if anybody's got any other questions, then please let me or Phil know, perhaps after the meeting, and then we can answer those for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. We're now moving on to the main agenda, item 5, which is on page 13 of our report. There is only one item on the agenda today. For your information, a paper has just been handed out, and I just want to check that I don't know if you had a chance to look at that. If not, then I'm willing to give you, again, another 5 minutes to check that if you felt you needed it.
Can I just clarify the status of that?
Yes.
If I can just clarify, members, these are the comments that Lincolnshire County Council made to the application, and these were published on the website and they are summarised in the report. But I think there's a couple of paragraphs which we've highlighted for you which are particularly pertinent to today's debate, which perhaps weren't as well reflected in the papers as they could have been. So we thought the easiest thing was just to give you the document verbatim so you've got it in front of you. Thank you.
Would members like 5 minutes to look at this document? Are you happy to move forward? I think I'll have a show of hands. I've got a lot of heads down actually, so shall I ask for show of hands? So it's just like 5 minutes. Oh, okay. I'll just give you 5 minutes. I will now proceed. So we are looking at planning application S23/0785, which is section 73 application to remove condition 24, which relates to off-site highways works of planning permission granted under S15/3189. I will now hand over to our planning officer, Adam Murray, who will go through the details of this for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. As the Chair has just said, this is application S23/0785, and it's an Section 73 application to remove Condition 24 of Planning Permission S15/3189, and the site is land to the north of Longcliffe Road in Grantham, and the application has been referred to committee due to requiring a planning obligation to secure a financial contribution. Now, I appreciate that Section 73 application is something slightly different for members to consider, not something that generally comes to committee too often. So just for members' benefit, a Section 73 application is one made under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act. It is an application to either vary or remove a condition attached to a planning permission. In essence, what happens then is if members were minded to grant planning permission, what occurs is that you have a new planning permission which sits alongside the original planning permission, which would be unaffected, and your new planning permission would take into account the changes to conditions that you're considering. It's very clear in the legislation that the only thing that can be considered as part of these types of application is the conditions to which permission is being granted. So members, it's not possible for you to revisit the principle of development today or anything else that's not covered explicitly by the condition that we're considering as part of this application. So just be very clear in terms of the scope of matters that are for consideration as part of the committee today. So just as an overview in terms of the site itself, it's a site of around about 93 acres of land on the northern edge of Grantham, which adjoins onto the Manthorpe estate to the south and Manthorpe village to the east. The site is bound to the east coast main line to the west, and the northern boundary runs partly along Belton Lane and then follows the existing overhead power lines on the site before continuing along the running furrows where it meets the A607. So just a bit more of a zoomed in aerial image there. Outline planning permission S15/3189, granted planning permission for a sustainable urban extension of no more than 480 dwellings, a neighbourhood centre, single form entry primary school, ancillary formal and informal public open space, including structural landscaping, biodiversity enhancements and access, and that was granted following a planning appeal in January 2018. Reserve matters approval for the residential parcels and the structural landscaping have subsequently been approved in 2021 and 2022. Now, as I say, condition 24 in this case is in relation to off-site highways works, and the current application, the proposal is to remove that condition. As worded within the appeal decision, the condition states that no dwelling within the development hereby permitted shall be occupied until the highway improvements to the junction at Belton Lane and the B1174 as shown indicatively on figure 12 of the transport assessment and improvements to 2 pairs of existing bus stops at the junctions between Low Road and the A607, comprising 160mm raised access curbs and dropped crossing points, are completed in accordance with a scheme submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Such schemes shall confirm that no more than 50 dwellings hereby permitted shall be occupied until the approved highways and bus stop improvements have been completed. Now, the key thing in terms of consideration of the current application is that Belton Lane B1174 junction. I'm sure members are very familiar with it, but what we've got on the screen here is a plan to show the application site outlined in red, and the junction that's actually referred to in the condition is to the north of Great Gonaby, so just shown indicatively here in yellow. As I say, members I'm sure are entirely familiar with this junction. You'll appreciate just a few images of the junction itself. You'll see the steep retaining structures, the topography involved. So this is looking from the north towards Great Gonaby. You've got Belton Lane here on the left-hand side. And then looking in the other direction towards the junction with the A1, downtown Aldridge, etc., is further to the north there. And then from within Belton Lane, looking towards the junction. So the key matter for consideration relates to highways implications of the scheme. The applicant has been engaging with County Council as the Highways Authority in terms of the technical design for the junction improvements that have been referred to in the condition. And hopefully what's being reiterated in terms of the papers that are in front of you now, members, is that following that engagement, LCC have confirmed that the junction improvement scheme that was envisaged within the scheme would not be technically feasible to deliver, so it wouldn't provide a safe solution. Now, as part of that ongoing engagement, LCC have actually been undertaking updated modelling within the Grantham area. And what that has shown is that the baseline background growth in just general traffic growth isn't as high as what was originally envisaged within the transport assessment that was submitted as part of the original appeal decision. And as a result of that, what that shows is that the development scheme itself in isolation wouldn't have a severe impact on the junction to necessitate that improvement. But when you consider the cumulative impact of the scheme coupled with the other growth schemes within Grantham, such as the downtown designer outlet village, that does necessitate an improvement to that junction still. So what has now been identified is essentially that a wider scheme of project will come forward. That in itself, though, will be led by the County Council as the Highways Authority rather than any single individual applicant. And schemes that do have an impact on that junction, such as this development and the downtown development, will make a financial contribution towards a package of improvements, which would then be pooled, and the County Council would deliver that scheme themselves as the Highways Authority. Now, appreciate that the original condition didn't just relate solely to the highways improvements, there was also the scheme of bus stop improvements. That's been confirmed that there's no technical constraints to those bus stops improvements being delivered. So rather than removing the condition as proposed by the applicant, what the office's recommendation is to vary the condition, which would still require those bus stop improvements to be delivered, and just clarifies the wording of the trigger points for those improvements to come forward. And then a financial contribution would be payable under a legal obligation for the actual improvements to the junction. That financial contribution would be payable prior to first occupation on the site, and then it would be then for the Highways Authority to actually deliver the scheme in a timely manner beyond that. So, in terms of the updated condition that we're recommending for consideration, it's that no dwelling within the development hereby permitted shall be occupied until a scheme for the improvements to 2 pairs of existing bus stops at the junction between Low Road and the A607 to comprise of 160mm raised access curbs and dropped crossing points with tactile paving are to be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and thereafter no more than 50 dwellings hereby permitted shall be occupied until the bus stop improvements have been completed in accordance with the approved details. So based on that, the officer recommendation is to authorise the Assistant Director to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the deed of variation to secure the financial contribution, and then subject to the recommended schedule of conditions set out within the report. And I'll hand back to you at that point, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will reserve questions for Officer till after we've heard all of our speakers. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. So just as a reminder, our speakers may speak for 3 minutes. And as I mentioned earlier, we have today 2 speakers. So first of all, if we could have District Ward Councillor Ian Stokes, if you would like to speak. We'll just let you know when the clock starts. We'll start timing when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on this application, which was granted in January 2018, and it still keeps coming back with various changes to this 480 house scheme. Condition 24, as set out on 2.2, was approved by the inspector and should be retained. There may well be a different aspect to it, but the junction of Belton Lane and B1174 is difficult. But placing traffic lights at the top of the slope would allow turning from the B1174 into Belton Lane without the need to widen the road at the junction, because the facilities there are really not able to be altered, because you've got football training on one side in the park, and you've got the new cemetery for the village on the other side. So really you cannot demolish any wall there outwards to allow for a further lane. So my solution would help, but they seem to want to offer this £412,635 to perform the work, which according to the LCC is impractical. So what is this money going to be for? The variation to the scheme should, as I mentioned on several occasions, be the road junction at the other end of Belton Lane, out onto the 607. That is where this money should be spent, and Belton and Manthorpe Parish Council under 5.2 have put out the claim very long and very strongly, because this junction is dangerous. As from Belton Lane turning right, there is a dip in the road you can hardly see, and from my own experience of turning right from the A607 to Belton Lane, I've even experienced a bus going in the back of me because the road is so dangerous. So I really don't know what you're going to do on this, but I feel sure that you should instruct the officer to retain the number of houses that have got to be built before the money is done, before the work's done, before the houses are done, because we've had problems in other areas of Grantham where we've not got a bridge because of this difficulty.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If we could now have our next speaker, please. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I will allow questions if you would be willing. If anybody would like to ask you any questions, I will allow that. Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stokes. I know both junctions that you are referring to. They're both, the one on the B1174 is particularly tight if you're turning onto Belton Lane. And I appreciate the comments from the other one as well. In your view, because I know you live here local, which would you say is the most dangerous of those two junctions? Is it the one on the B1174 or the one on the A607? Thanks. If
I may, sorry, you may like Councillor Stokes to answer the question. We're not here to discuss the junction of the Belton Lane A607, and whether or not that, in anybody's opinion, is dangerous is irrelevant. That the scheme has got consent. There is that position that they could implement the approved scheme. The county, during the appeal for that scheme and this scheme, have not raised any issues in relation to that particular junction, and it's not something we can revisit, I'm afraid. So even if you were to allow Councillor Stokes to answer the question, it doesn't matter which junction he feels is most dangerous. The only issue we're looking at today, members, is the junction with the Gonaby Road, I'm going to call it, and Belton Lane, at the other end of Belton Lane, not the 607 junction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stokes, I'd like to ask you then word that question slightly different. Do you feel that junction is dangerous as it is at the moment?
What, the one in Gonaby?
Yes, Councillor Stokes, that's the only one we can discuss at the moment, the one at B117.
It's not dangerous as such, but it's busy. And it's a question of where the traffic lights are put. And if they're put right on the road, then you can't put them there. They've got to be at the top of the hill. And then the lorries that turn into Belton Lane will have the complete swerve. And that's the only way that it can be done, in my opinion.
Yes, I know the junction that you're referring to. And my issue with that, I think, is quite a dangerous issue, is travelling towards Grantham and turning left onto Belton Lane. The narrowness of that actual junction there means vehicles have to swing out first into the oncoming traffic, and then into the oncoming traffic coming down from the junction as well. So yeah, I think
I am sorry, Councillor Harrison. We're kind of verging into some of the points you might want to make during the debate. This is just for questions only.
Checking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If we may now have our next speaker, who, as I said, is Mark Bassett, representing Allison Homes Limited.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Bassett of Frees LLP, and I represent Allison Homes as applicant. The purpose of this application is to facilitate the delivery of the site and specifically assist in bringing forward 480 homes. The Council's latest annual position statement on housing supply shows that 144 dwellings are projected by the Council to be delivered on this site in the next 5 years, with completions from 24-25. Allison Homes is committed to achieving and hopefully exceeding this delivery. The issue lies with Condition 24 of the outline permission, which restricts occupation until highway improvements to the junction of Belton Lane and Newark Hill are completed. The condition has two conflicting triggers, but notwithstanding this, Allison Homes submitted a junction improvement design based on the requirements of the condition to Lincolnshire County Council in the summer of 2022 as part of the Section 278 Highway Works process. Lincolnshire County Council reviewed the junction design, but concluded that the layout indicatively required by the condition would not be safe and could not be delivered. The county reviewed whether any variations could be achieved, but concluded that any works to provide signalised junction improvements would require alterations to retaining structures and third-party land. Effectively, Allison Homes are in a position whereby the condition restricts its ability to build out the permission because the Highway Authority does not consider the junction improvements they require by condition would be safe. Allison Homes has done all it can to comply with the condition. Allison Homes have met the Parish Council to discuss this issue in depth, and this has resulted in them in removing their objection to the application. The county has commented that the transport assessment likely overestimates peak traffic growth for 2024, and that the original TA identified that the development would have an effect on the capacity of this junction, but it would only be relatively modest. The requirement for junction improvements were largely driven by a projection that it would already be over capacity by 2024, regardless of development, but County advised that this is not materialised. Notwithstanding this, Allison Homes remain committed and invested to improving the junction. However, it is evident that this will require a wider scheme than envisaged at the grant of the outline permission. In discussion with the county, who are evaluating options for the junction improvements, we have agreed a financial contribution equivalent to the cost of the original planned works to assist in delivering future improvement works. This will be secured by a Section 106 agreement. The other component of Condition 24, the improvements to the bus stops, will also be delivered. In summary, Condition 24 does not pass the tests of paragraph 56 of the MPPF in that it is not precise or reasonable.
30 seconds.
The revision to the condition, combined with a financial contribution to infrastructure, is a proportionate and reasonable alternative and will assist in delivering the upgrade to the junction. It will allow Allison Homes to start delivering homes on the site and make an important contribution to housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Does anybody have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Mills?
Yes, could you just please explain how many houses per year, once you start building, you expect to be building over a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first delivery year is always a little lower, but in the region of 50 to 60 houses, something of that order. Sorry, yeah, no, 50 to 60 houses per annum. So the first year will probably be slightly less as you put infrastructure in, and then probably 50 to 60 per annum from there.
Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Hello. Just a quick question. Clearly something needs to be done about this junction, and it seems that what we're now looking at is that you're transferring your responsibility to LCC by their agreement. In your discussions with them, did they make any commitment in terms of timescale or trigger points by which they would actually get the junction sorted?
I think the short answer and honest answer to that is no. We've not got any definitive timescale from them.
Yes, thank you. To be fair, that's probably a question actually that had we been able to get a representative from LCC Highways here today, they should be answering. And unfortunately, we did try. Our officers did try, but they have not come, as you can see. Thank you, Councillor Mills.
Did they answer that question at all yesterday when I think they were asked? LCC Highways?
So at the moment, Lincolnshire County Council's Highways Authority have commissioned the feasibility study, and that work is in progress. That will look at the design for the junction that they want to deliver. So I think it's fair to say that they are committed. There's reasonable expectation that they're committed to the scheme. We don't quite yet know final timetable for delivery. It could be a number of years, partly because there's a number of schemes that will need to contribute, because this is not the only scheme which is going to have a bit of an impact on that junction. But I can't give you a definite timescale at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to address a question as in the wording. You said that the LCC has said that the traffic problem had materialised. I'm looking at the actual report from LCC, and it's the actual wording that they said is therefore likely not to materialise. Likely. So that tells me that they haven't actually done any testing on it. Now, I run a company in the town that runs a lot of vehicles, and I know for a fact that junction has got busier and busier. I've got vehicles going down that junction daily on a daily basis, so I know it gets busier, and especially at peak time. So I'm a little bit concerned of the play on words there with you saying it hasn't materialised and LCC saying that it's likely not to materialise.
Well, the county's comments does say likely materialise. What it's based on is their assessment of this Grantham traffic model. So it's their comment against what the base case was projected to be at 2024. So the original transport assessment done in 2015 would have projected a baseline level of traffic to 2024. And what the Highway Authority seems to be saying is that based on the Grantham traffic model, that level of traffic that was originally projected in the TA at 2024 has not likely to be materialised. That's the county's assertion.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if Emma Whittaker can add any more comments to that.
Thank you. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a highways expert. I'm not, but I have to deal with these sorts of queries on lots of applications, as you can imagine. When you do a transport assessment, you take details and record baseline, so what's happening, and you model number of traffic movements through junctions, whatever the scope of the study is, over a set period of time. But you also have to model in what is going to happen in the future. And they will always look forward, usually at least 5 years, and they will look at consented schemes, allocated schemes in the plan that may come forward in that period, and they'll also have factors that will look at just sort of general growth, what's going to happen to the population and everything else. So that's where they can do that prediction as to what is going to happen or what is likely using their best tools, their best sort of models is going to happen in the future. They've also got lots of databases that will tell them that if you've got a scheme of this type and this nature, then it is likely to generate X number of vehicular trips at peak times and off-peak times, etc. So there's a lot of science that goes behind it. If you ever look at a transport assessment, there's a few pages at the end with a lot of numbers. That's what that data's feeding into. What they would have done is the applicants would have done a transport assessment or a TA for the 2015 scheme. That would have looked at baseline and put the predictions in. That would have been scrutinised by the County Council, and it was agreed that based on those predictions and those estimates, that the junction at the Belton Lane, Gonnaby Hill Road was going to be at capacity without the development, and therefore the development was going to exacerbate that situation. What's now happened is that they believe the growth, the natural growth that they thought would happen since 2015 hasn't happened. Therefore, we're not facing a situation where the capacity, the theoretical capacity of that junction is at capacity. That means the junction can take more traffic before it hits a problem. And it hits a problem because you can't physically get more vehicles in and out of that problem without causing delays. Then in planning, we need to look at whether you've got severe impacts before you start looking to refuse applications because it's got an unacceptable implication or impact on that junction. So what the county is saying is they had a situation, we're now in a different situation. Their guess, their belief, their understanding, based on the evidence and what they're seeing day in, day out, is that what's happened is that background growth hasn't materialised, and that's where this sort of phrase around it, it's likely that it hasn't materialised, has come from. It's because they're trying to explain why we've got a slightly different situation to what we had in 2015. But the case that's in front of you, it's not Alison Holmes trying to wiggle out of making a highways junction. You've got a scheme which is technically not feasible. It would create an unsafe development. So county cannot allow that development, which we previously anticipated to go ahead. And what county have asked for as the Highways Authority is they have asked for the financial contribution towards a different scheme that they can bring forwards, and they don't believe that this is going to create such a severe impact that they need to say to us that the scheme's got to be delivered before commencement of development, before first occupation, before whatever the case may be. If they had, we'd have put that in a Grampian condition. So there is an impact, there is a need for this improvement, but it shouldn't stop the developer from being able to construct those houses, because that impact is going to be mitigated and going to be dealt with by county through pooling of contributions. Hopefully that just clarifies a bit of how they've got there. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Councillor Whittington and Councillor Mills.
Thanks, Richie. I mean, first of all, I'm extremely concerned the highways aren't actually here because, you know, Emma's done her best.
I'm so sorry. We're still in the. We still have our guest speaker. So, if we do we have any more questions for our guest speaker? No, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Okay. In that case, sorry. We now have questions for our officer. If there's anything you'd like to present there. So, Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as if the justification we change this condition is based on information that the highways are suggesting. And I'm just really concerned that nobody from Highways is actually here to answer these detailed questions. I mean, we've probably got some really, really detailed questions. And Emma's doing her best to try, to try and provide the background and the context. But I'm not entirely sure that I feel I can make a decision without having somebody from Highways actually here to answer some very detailed questions that I think this committee would like to ask them. I think it's extremely remiss of Highways. I'm just wondering if we can make our displeasure felt towards them.
Yes, if Emma would like to come back.
Absolutely. I have a meeting with the head of Highways coming up in the next couple of months, and I can certainly pass that on. I think it's next month in terms of that. But I mean, I would suggest, as officers, we've asked a lot of questions, we've got a lot of background. I think we understand the situation. We'll obviously do our best to assist members, and then clearly if we get to a point where we can't, we can review where we go next. But I think probably proceed and ask you questions, and we will not give you advice if we are not comfortable with the answers we are giving you. Please take that assurance.
Because just like that, one of the questions I was going to ask was that this new scheme that Highways are proposing for that junction is predicated on them receiving contributions from other developments, and they refer specifically to the downtown development. Now, as far as I'm aware, nothing's happened with that downtown development for several years, so there's no guarantees that development will ever take place. So they're predicating the funding for this on developments that may not actually happen. And I can't see how, therefore, we can support something like this that may only part fund that junction development. And these are the sort of questions that we could ask Highways and say, if you don't get those other contributions, where else is the funding going to come from?
Yeah, Emma, if you'd like to respond to that.
Thank you. It's a very good point, very good question, and something that we have actually been challenging and speaking to County about. So essentially, with regards to the downtown, we've granted outline planning permission, and I understand that they will be coming to talk to us in the very, very near future around reserve matters. So hopefully there is actually some progress on that site. But you're quite right, that still doesn't mean that development is going to come forward. So one of the points that we were discussing was what happens if that junction improvement doesn't come forward, because as it currently stands, Alison Homes could build out the whole scheme. County are left with contributions, and at some point there'll be a clawback clause in the agreement that means that County will have to repay that money back to Alison Homes. I understand that Alison Homes don't necessarily want that to happen. They are working with Lincolnshire County Council, and they do want those junction improvements to happen. It's just it's been taken out of their hands slightly because of the technical difficulties around the design of the junction. However, County have confirmed that whilst there's an impact on that junction, because it's not operating at capacity, it's below capacity at the moment, it can accommodate the growth in traffic, and there will be an impact, but it will not be so severe that we need to think about saying no development beyond a certain trigger point, or no development full stop until it's been delivered. And we haven't got any evidence to the contrary. We don't have a transport assessment. We haven't done our own assessment, as you quite rightly would assume that we haven't, because that's for County and to do, that gives us any evidence to suggest that that is incorrect.
Just to come back, if Highways had been here, we could have asked them those questions, and they're not here. And for me, that is the real issue, that Highways aren't here. We could have asked them those questions. They're putting us in a very invidious position here by not coming.
I understand that. I will share your comments, and that's absolutely fine. But please be assured we have asked that specific question, and we have got the information from County.
Thank you. Councillor Mills.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure I've had an answer yet to why was the previous scheme approved, which allowed this development to go forward over the years, because then there was apparently no objection on Highways grounds. and now it's being identified as not feasible. I don't understand why this wasn't picked up in the very first instance. I don't know how that has gone on for, 12 years? And now we're being told all of a sudden that's not feasible and we've got to do something else. I totally get that Alison's homes are not anything to blame on this at all. I think this is purely a highways criticism that I think we're all making. And obviously, this junction, it's been in the pipeline to be improved all this time, that is what's necessary. So I agree with Councillor Whittington. We're being asked to remove this condition in lieu of a financial contribution, yet we've got no assurances on the critical infrastructure delivery in the famous planning words, in an orderly and timely manner. We've got absolutely no reassurances at all. Now, regardless of whether they think the traffic might be reducing a bit, it is very nearly at critical stretch, that junction. It's going to be, we can only imagine, many, many years before this even comes forward, even if they can acquire the third-party land, which I would say is quite a big question mark as well. And I really think Highways should have been here to answer all these questions. And I'm, getting to the opinion that I don't think we can make a decision on this today without some proper answers.
Would you like to respond to that, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that County would give you a different answer to the one giving you, because we've asked the questions. In terms of the original assessments, I obviously wasn't involved in that original decision. There was a statement of common ground signed up to between the County as Highways Authority and Alison Holmes as appellant. There must have been nothing in front of them at the time that indicated that those works were not technically feasible, and the evidence at the time indicated that those works were absolutely necessary before the 50th occupation. Here we're faced with a situation where the situation has changed. The works are still needed to improve the situation, but it's not so critical that they have to be delivered before the 50th occupation or the first occupation, and the baseline has changed so that we're in a different situation with regards to the junction. And what County have actually said is that the most of the problems at the junction are actually due to existing traffic, but it's not operating at capacity, and it doesn't have a poor or bad safety record. So it's not one of the junctions that has been flagged as a priority junction in Grantham, because it's not one of the ones which currently are operating at or above capacity with a safety issue.
Thank you. Harish, Councillor Bisnelson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The part, I think it can get is part of my my questions, and maybe answered but not fully. What I was thinking, is this the Highways, has it done a cost-benefit analysis, and at the moment for that junction that they come up that at the moment there's no need to it because there's not that much traffic going through it. So what is the things that I would like to know? If we approve this current this application for the condition to be converted into pounds and sterling, pounds and pence, will they adhere to the same time scale that before this development is completed, that they will do the junctions, you will improve the junctions, or not? Or is it still going to be just go in the coffer and it just disappears?
I can come back on that one, Councillor. So I think as the Assistant Director's been saying, the situation has changed in terms of that modelling, which now shows it's not necessary for those junction improvements to be carried out before occupations on that site. So theoretically speaking, yes, the development as a whole could be completed and occupied before those junction works are delivered. Now, as the Assistant Directors also said, the County Council have started that feasibility study. They are committed to doing that. So there's clearly an intention on their behalf to carrying out the works, but there is nothing in terms of the position that we can impose in terms of an updated condition to restrict the number of occupations on that site until the works are completed, because we have no evidence to suggest that the development as a whole, if completed, would have a severe impact on that junction.
Thank you. Yes, certainly.
Well, assuming this goes through today, and will that affect any of the other S106 agreement, that's been agreed so far?
No, so it would be a deed of variation. So the existing Section 106 would stay as it is. Those financial contributions would be secured as they have been. The deed of variation would just secure this as an additional financial contribution above and beyond those that have already been agreed.
Thank you. If we could have Councillor Bird next, please.
Yes, hello. I'm not quite sure if this is an appropriate question, but what would be the implications for us and for the development if, in fact, we opted not to release the Condition 24?
So the situation is essentially that original permission stands as it is, so that permission remains unaffected. That still would exist for the site. The issue you would have then is that we have the evidence from the County Council that pre-occupation condition to require the junction works to be carried out cannot feasibly be achieved. It's not possible for that to be done. So they couldn't comply with that condition to meet that requirement. So the development wouldn't come forward. You'd have an undeliverable site. If members were to go down the route of saying that they wanted to refuse the current application, then of course the applicant would have the right to appeal that, and it would be a question then is, again, the evidence before us says the impact on that junction isn't severe to restrict this development to start itself.
Could I just... Thank you. Is it possible for us to not defer, but to actually await the decision on releasing it, subject to a design plan and a commitment from LCC?
I think that would be entirely unreasonable in the sense of, as the evidence that we've got before is that whilst LCC are going through that feasibility study, the information from that modelling shows that it's not so critical for that junction to be upgraded before development starts on that site. So if we were to, theoretically, if we were imposing a condition to say prior to commencement the design of the junction must be agreed, etc., because of the uncertainty of the timescales that we have in terms of that scheme coming forward from county, whilst they're committed to it, it would be restricting development, it would be preventing development on a site without any evidence to back that up effectively.
Certainly, Emma.
I think just to add to that, you also run the risk of an appeal, and you run a risk of an appeal under non-determination because the applicant doesn't have to just sit and wait for us to make that decision. They can go to the inspector and say the local authority's not made a decision within the 12-week timescale. I would like you now, Planning Inspectorate, to make that decision. So we'd be faced with the same questions. We don't have the technical evidence to demonstrate that the impact on that junction from this development is severe before any occupation, or at the point of first occupation, or at the point of 10th, 50th, 100th, whatever it is. So we'd be faced going to an appeal, yeah, we'd be answering the same question, but just in front of a planning inspector, I'm afraid. So, yeah, thank you.
Tim, Councillor Harrison.
Work through this here is so a while ago we agreed that there was going to be an issue with this junction, and we need to put a new junction in. And now we're saying that's changed and there's no need for it. What happens in 3 weeks' time when it changes again and we find that there is a need for it? What happens when we find that nothing's done in that junction? We've had 480 houses built, which is over 600 cars contributing to that thing, and there's still nothing done to it. This is the sort of thing that happens a lot in this town that I've seen as a bystander in the town, that we get promised the earth and get given the mud, really. You know, it's these promises are made ad hoc to get a decision passed. I feel that I can't quite get my head around it. We've been given no evidence. We're relying on people saying, well, the evidence, and then when I read the report, it says, well, possibly, maybe, likely, you know, and nothing's put in there concrete for me. Nothing's telling me, yes, we've done this feasibility study. It categorically showed there was no need for it. What was the difference from the feasibility study they did a number of years ago that said there was? What is the reason that's made that difference? You know, we're sort of being told, well, this is it, and this is what you've got to do, and you've got to pass this, and it doesn't sit well with me at all. And as everybody else is saying, highways aren't here to answer these questions. I've got lots of stuff I'd like to ask them, you know. It just doesn't sit very well with me at all, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. I would, if I may, just like to intercede and hopefully a helpful way. I have been a former member, this is my 4th term, I have been a former member of this committee virtually throughout my entire 4 terms. Therefore, I have got a very holistic view of what has come through our planning committee, all the highways implications of all of the projects. And in very simple terms, I think what's actually happened is when you look at some of the major developments planned for the Grantham area, they haven't happened. Plus, on top of that, we've had COVID as well, which has clearly impacted on traffic flows and a move towards internet shopping. So the whole world has actually changed. And what's actually happened is that Alison homes have, in effect, whereas once they would have been in the batch, competing in effect for that road space with downtown, with the Southern Quadrant development, with the Barracks development, with the King 31 project, which also incidentally is earmarked to bring about at least a million visitors a year into Grantham. They haven't happened. And so any predicted forecasts that Lincs County Council may have made then they just no longer apply. It is actually that simple. So in many respects, what we're now looking at really, at the moment, what's on the table, and at the moment most likely to come forward at present in the near future, is actually this development. And I think that's what's caused this problem, because, as I said, the trouble with forecasts is they are subject to change. So I just thought I'd give you that background.
Thank you. If I'd just like to clarify, if you remember back to your planning training, and apologies those that have had many planning trainings, you've heard the same thing. You've got to make your planning decisions based on evidence. So the evidence that the previous decision was made on was a transport assessment, and if I read out to you the words verbatim that are in Lincolnshire County Council's comments, the 2015 transport assessment included a base case 24 assessment of the highway network without development, which predicted the junction would be over capacity in 2024. With the development flows added on, the situation was predicted to be worse. In recent LCC update of the Grantham traffic model, this junction was not identified as a capacity concern on the network and is therefore likely that the 2015 estimates of peak hour growth have not materialised. It's agreed the development will have an impact on the capacity of the junction, but requiring the development to provide total capacity mitigation in terms of full junction improvements, as defined in Condition 24, now seem not in accordance with the fair and reasonable SIL test, given the impact due to the development considered on the impact due to the existing, it's a very long sentence, existing traffic and general traffic growth. What the county is saying is that they have redone the evidence, they have looked at the traffic modelling in around, and they've readjusted that base. They have lots of evidence and information around the vehicular movements that will be generated from a scheme. So they know, and they as experts can tell the planning authority, so that's this council, that's this committee, that that junction is not at capacity, whereas in 2015 it was predicted that it would be at capacity without the development. They are telling us that with the development, the junction can accommodate the growth, but there will be a little bit of impact on how that development or how that traffic flows through, and as a result they would like the contribution so they can deliver the highways impact. They are also telling us that the scheme that everybody thought could be delivered last time round has turned out not to be deliverable, and as Adam said, that means that you've got a scheme which is likely to be unimplementable. But of course Alison Holmes could appeal the decision, and then we're faced with the same question at the appeal, and the inspector will ask us for our evidence, and we don't have any evidence to counter what the county is saying, and they are experts in highways. They are saying that that junction is not currently at capacity. I know that's difficult for you to understand and to deal with, given that it's not the most pleasant junction to use. I know the junction particularly well, as I assume most of you probably do. But there is a point when they do that modelling that is where you have capacity of junctions and you look at the flows of traffic moving through, and they are the experts in this. So I really would urge you to listen to what they have advised.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just from what I understand, the new and improved junction that's being proposed requires some third-party land. Has that been secured in any way? And if that land can't be secured, then the junction won't be able to happen. So you'll be in a situation where you've got the money, but you can't actually make the junction.
So as we say, County at the moment are going through that feasibility study, so that's looking at the design of a junction that they would consider to be acceptable, and then from that they'll probably look to start to acquire the third-party land as necessary. Now, as Emma's already mentioned previously, what the deed of variation would do is there would be the payment of the financial contribution, and there would be a clawback clause included within that, essentially, that if the money hasn't been spent by the county council within a certain period for that junction improvements, then the funds would be repayable to the applicant. Now, obviously, as I say, with the feasibility study going forward, there's clearly a commitment to do that from the county council, and there's probably a better scope for them to look at options for that junction than if the developer were doing it, because as Highways Authority, that is effectively a bit more in their control. But as I think we keep referring back to, the position in terms of the evidence is that in that theoretical situation that the junction improvements don't come forward, there is nothing within the evidence that we have to suggest that it is necessary in terms of the severe impact to restrict occupations on that site. It's the cumulative impact with other schemes within Grantham that requires that junction, but that this development individually wouldn't have a severe impact that they would consider harmful if those junction improvements don't come forward.
But if I can just clarify, what that means that County is saying is if this development came forward, if your downtown's in, if nothing else came through, there will be an impact on that junction, but not so severe that it triggers the necessity to do the massive junction improvement that they want. It's that combination of schemes coming forward, and therefore Alison Holmes needs to make its fair contribution to that junction improvement.
Thank you. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, I just want to come back on this, because Lincolnshire Highways, the experts, have got things wrong in the past. So I don't think we can hear and say, okay, they may be the experts, but these are experts who have got things wrong in the past. So I just like to make that point. In terms of evidence, we haven't seen any. We've seen statements from Lincolnshire County Council, Highways Department. I've not seen evidence to substantiate the statements they are making. Now, I consider myself to be, And I just really would have thought that it has been a material change from the 2015 to now. We should actually be able to see, to actually see those reports, to see the evidence, so we can evaluate it. Because it's very difficult for us. You know, I don't want to come over as being too, but I think I've got the ability, the intellectual capacity, to look at a report from 2015 for highways and a report from now for highways, to actually follow it through myself and reach an informed decision on it. And for me, that isn't here. That evidence, that crucial evidence, is lacking. We've got statements from highways. I want to see the evidence that substantiate those statements, and I haven't seen them.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Councillor Crawford.
I'm not sure if we've gone into debate now. It feels like we have, kind of.
We have. I think, to be fair, because it is such a complex thing, that I think that you can move in if you do feel that it's appropriate to make statements at this point. The only thing I would do, if I may intercede, because I think the point wasn't raised before but was touched on by our speaker, if I could just go back to our officer regarding the position with the parish council, because I believe that was submitted earlier.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I should have updated as part of the presentation. We did receive a late representation from the parish council this morning, just to confirm what the applicant had said is that they have met with them and have now withdrawn their previous objection to the scheme. So that objection that was set out in the report is no longer their position.
Thank you. If I may carry on, Madam Chairman. Having listened to all the points of view from everybody, and I feel now we're just going round and round in circles, I think highways at county have got a lot to answer for, because they obviously looked at the original plan and went, yeah, that's okay, and then they've changed their minds, which hasn't helped us. I think really county have put us on between a rock and a hard place, because we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. And it is with regret, I feel, that I have to propose that we accept this, because I don't feel that highways are going to come here. If we asked to defer this, that highways would come here and answer those questions, because they never want to. And then it's just dragging it on, and in the meantime Alison Holmes can do their bit and everything. So it is with regret that I propose that we accept these. Thank you.
Thank you for that proposal. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bishnelby.
Madam Chairman, I fully agree with what has been said, that we are in a hard place at the moment. I would support the proposal that we go ahead. I think let's hope that the LCC highways, in their wisdom, that they will complete, honestly, the improve the junctions within the time that those developments go ahead before they be fully inhabited. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a proposal which has also been seconded, so we're now open to the debate regarding that proposal. So, Councillor Mills.
Yes, thank you. I think hope is probably a very critical word in this, isn't it? I also would like to just ask about the condition that all construction traffic should be using the Belton Lane access. And again, highways aren't here to answer the question as to that impact over probably many years of construction ongoing. I think I worked it out roughly 5 years to build 300 houses and 7 years probably for the 480. So over the next 5 to 10 years, without that junction improvement, because I don't think it's going to happen within that time, we then have all that construction traffic going that way and using that Belton Lane access. There's the Humpback Bridge, of course, which I know isn't what we're talking about today. I accept that. But on the other hand, is this unimproved junction suitable for all those lorries that are going to be turning probably left or right, inside out, at that Newark Hill junction? Do we have any comment from highways on that?
Thank you, Councillor Mills.
Chair, do you want me to come back on that one? Just to comment on that one, to be fair, that condition is the condition that was on the original permission, so that is unaffected by the current application. Whilst there was obviously the difficulties in terms of the trigger points that were included for condition 24 for those works in terms of the off-site highways, either one of those two trigger points, whether it was first occupation or 50th occupation, would have seen construction traffic entering via the Belton Lane access only, because that was what the construction method statement says. So that position essentially is unaffected by this decision that a committee are being asked to take today.
Yes, I understand that, but of course, if it was 50 houses, that's only a year into construction, not 5 or 10 years.
Emma Whittaker.
Thank you. If I can just jump in. Actually, the condition doesn't require them to travel down Belton Lane. What it's doing is it's requiring them to use the Belton Lane access as opposed to the Longcliffe Road access on the application site, so there could be movements elsewhere. What we could do is we could probably amend that condition to ask for some routing plans to be submitted, and then we can have that further discussion with county. That means that there's a bit more control over where HGVs, for example, doing deliveries move, and whether they go through that road that way or whether they travel a different way to get to and from site.
I really don't understand you, Emma, on that. If it's said in the condition that they have to use what will be the new access to the site of Belton Lane, the lorries will have to use Belton Lane. I don't understand. I thought the whole idea of that was to take the traffic out of the current estate and that they would then be coming in at the Belton Lane entrance. That's the only entrance there is that will be. That's exactly what it says.
On the development, there's three proposed accesses.
Two proper proposed access and then an emergency access.
Yeah. So you've got a Belton Lane access, but you've also got access from the site onto Longcliffe Road. Without that line in that condition, we would have no control over where delivery lorries went, vehicular traffic, construction traffic. They could use any access into the site, but they're only talking about the physical access into the site. They're not talking what happens and where the traffic comes from. So, for instance, the traffic could exit the site onto Belton Lane, turn right, and then back onto the 607. It could turn left, and it could go through the junction we've just been talking about. What I'm suggesting is a way around that is we add an extra line to the condition to require details of routing plans, so that we can have that discussion with Lincolnshire County Council, so that if they came back and said, you know what, the situation has changed slightly and we are a little bit concerned about HGVs using that access onto Newark Hill, then they could require that HGVs have to go the longer way round, which is via the 607. And of course, we don't know where the HGVs are coming from for the deliveries. They might be coming very locally from within Grantham, they might be coming from Lincoln. They may not actually be coming from the A1 direction at all. They're all unknowns, but we could put a requirement for a routing plan to be submitted and agreed as part of that construction management plan. But that one single line isn't telling us what happens to the traffic once it leaves the site, only that it must leave the site via the Belton Lane access.
Yes, I accept that. It doesn't actually say they've got to go to the Newark Hill Act. I understand that, but it's obviously further pressure on that junction and the lane, and I don't think any of us would want that traffic going down Longcliffe Road, surely, residential areas. So I think it's quite clear that it would be coming out onto the Belton Lane, and you're quite right to say it could go either way, but it is extra pressure on those junctions.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mills, for the very valid comments. Could I just ask for clarity, Emma, which condition were you proposing to make the request for the routing plan to be submitted and agreed?
It'd be condition 7 in your papers, Chair. It's labelled as condition 16. That was the original condition number on the appeal decision. So it's the construction method statement for each phase. That's the part 3 under that condition, says that all traffic, construction traffic, shall enter and leave the site via the proposed access on Belton Lane only. We could add another criteria within that the construction method statement shall include a routing agreement as well.
Thank you for that. If I may ask a question following up on that point, going back to the issue that a number of people have raised regarding the actual lack of information from county highways, have they assessed, do we know that they did assess the impact of the construction vehicles on Belton Lane? Have we had any clarity around that?
We've not asked that specific question as such, but when they consider any application, they do consider those sorts of issues in terms of construction traffic. You have to remember that construction traffic is temporary, albeit it could be a 10-year build programme, and therefore they do suggest conditions, if it's appropriate, around routing agreements, or in this case use of a particular access if another one is impractical. So I believe they will have taken that into account, and had they been concerned about there being any capacity issues and needed to trigger, because we've asked very specifically about those trigger points, I believe they would have flagged that with us had they believed that to be a particular issue. But I think the routing plan probably is your best option, because it deals with that scenario and allows us to agree proper routing plans for HGVs, and as well hours of delivery, so it's not putting pressure on junctions at key points, because if you imagine during the day that they're quite quiet junctions, it's during those peak hours, those rush hour points, where you're probably finding the worst situation with regards to traffic queues and waiting to pull out of junctions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just like to say that I'm quite happy for the addition of a routing plan and hours of delivery be added to the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's an amendment which, in effect, has now been proposed by Councillor Crawford. Could I just have a seconder for that? Thank you. That's Vishnu Singh. I feel like we're kind of coming to a close. I'm happy to get more comments if not. But one thing I would say, by looking at this one condition, one of the things we are kind of in danger of losing sight of actually is the overall benefit of the development and the additional housing that we do desperately need, which will come from that. So I would just like to put things into context, because there is a danger just looking at one small aspect that we do lose sight of that. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, and then Councillor Mills, and then Councillor Whittington.
With respect, Madam Chairman, we can't consider anything else, but you're asking us to consider the benefits that might come from this development. But we can't, when we're considering against this, we can't consider anything else. So really, we shouldn't be considering anything apart that junction. That is the only thing we should be considering. Now, I'd like to come back to you, if I may. You said that they're doing a feasibility study on that junction. What is the issue with the fact that we've waited this long, of us waiting slightly longer till the results of this feasibility study is passed through?
I think that was something that Emma answered earlier, in terms of the modelling that we have now suggests that the junction doesn't need to be upgraded before occupation of that development. So we don't have a clear timescale for that feasibility study and those junction improvements to be completed. It would be unreasonable for us to pose a restriction on this development in particular when we have no evidence to suggest that it is necessary.
Can I just come back on the point around asking the committee to consider the benefits? That's not strictly correct. When we can't revisit things like the principle of the development, we're revisiting the question we've been asked around that junction. However, Councillor Morgan is quite correct. We do need houses. We need to deliver houses. If we keep refusing sites, or we end up with sites that are not deliverable, it puts pressure on our 5-year supply. Now, we have a 5-year supply, but it's a very fluid situation, and we have to review that year on year. And the consequence of not having a 5-year supply is that you will get speculative developments, and you will have a tilted balance, meaning that you have to place significant weight on the benefit of those houses, and you might be asked to make some uncomfortable decisions around sites you would not otherwise have wanted developing. I think the point that Councillor Morgan was trying to make is that if you need to understand the consequences of refusing the application. The consequences, a possible appeal, the consequence of holding out for county to decide whether the junction, what the junction design will look like, are a possible appeal. And the other consequence of refusing it is you have a potentially unimplementable decision, meaning that nearly 500 homes will not come forward in the supply. That's not great moving forwards for our housing land supply position. So I think she's quite right just to remind members that you do need to be mindful of the consequences of the decision. And the deliverability of the houses is a significant benefit that you must give weight to in your decision. So hopefully that just clarifies that balance and why you can and need to consider that, whereas we're not actually considering the bigger round of the principle of development. Thank you.
Councillor Mills, I believe that you had your hand up again, and Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thank you. I think going back to the beginning of this, this development went through several appeals, and it wasn't arguably in the best of places. However, all through it, highways were accepting a junction improvement that they now say is unachievable. I keep going back to this because that enabled the original permission to be approved because it removed any highway objections. Now we're here to be told something else, that that was never needed anyway in the first place, and we're now into an unknown quantity of unknown feasibility and unknown timescales. I totally understand the hook upon which we've been put, but I really would like some sort of comment from this committee to go back to highways on this, because I think they've really put us in a very, and the applicant, to be honest, in an extremely difficult position over the years on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. I must admit I was thinking along similar lines, that I believe some strongly worded statement, if that's acceptable to Emma Whittaker, should be put forward to highways, because as you said, they have put us all, including our developer, which is completely unacceptable too, on a hook. I'd just like to pass to Emma, who had some more time.
Thank you. I'd just like to clarify, nobody's saying the evidence that they had in 2015 was wrong. That was the evidence, that was the modelling, that was the best predictions using the science, using the methods we had at the time. What we're saying is something's changed. That's likely to be that the growth that was predicted hasn't happened, and therefore the situation today, if we were looking at this completely afresh, this is the answer you would get, that there needs to be some contribution towards the junction improvement, but we do not need to prevent development. So just to clarify, it's not that the previous data was wrong, and we're not the story, as it were, has altered because the evidence has changed over the passage of time.
Sorry, can I just come back? Sorry.
Yeah, certainly.
I think what I wasn't saying about the data, I was actually talking about the traffic light improvements, whatever it was they were going to put in place, that everybody relied upon to make that development acceptable in those days, then when the traffic data was apparently different. But it still brings us back to the point that as experts they got that wrong, because they're now saying they can't deliver that regardless of data. They're also saying that that traffic junction needs improvement because of other schemes as well. So again, the original traffic lights might have worked, but they're not going to work, and so we are rather sceptical, I think, is one of the comments back to highways, that when we're told something, we need to be able to have confidence in that. And here we are in a situation where they haven't done the feasibility, they can't give us timescales, they might never get that third-party land, for example. So It was in that context that I felt I was saying my comment, because I know the history of all this site over the 12 years, and a lot of it was highways, and they assured everybody that it could all be sorted out. And here we are 12 years later, it can't be sorted out. 22 years later, it might not have been sorted out. So that's what I'm saying.
Thank you. I think just to kind of summarise that, the issue there is actually about the original design that they submitted rather than the actual data around the capacity at the site, which is, if we can make that point in as mentioned. And I think Councillor Whittington and then Councillor Crawford. My suggestion is and Councillor Bird. We seem to kind of be coming to a conclusion, I feel. So I think after that, if everyone's happy, unless anyone's got anything specific additional to add, I would like to then go to the vote. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm not at all happy with this, as I think I've expressed. I mean, we've not seen any of the evidence from Highways to substantiate their statements. They've put the developer in a terrible position. I was hoping that when we're making these key decisions that are going to affect the town and developers and housing and all this kind of stuff, and I appreciate the comments that we have to take into account the wider need of the houses, but earlier on we were told we only have to consider the junction. So I'm not entirely sure what it is that we're considering here. I don't feel I've got enough evidence to make a decision today, and therefore I will be abstaining.
Thank you for your comment. I will, because I feel it's a burning question that a number of people have, because there is, I think we are moving forward with a proposal, but I would like to ask this question. It was put at the very beginning when we were concerned that Highways couldn't come. What is our officer's position with regards to a deferral until we do get an answer from them? I think that needs to be made clear.
So absolutely, you could make a motion to defer. Obviously, you've got a motion on the table already, so you'd have to vote on that, or it'd have to be retracted. I don't know if we will get a Highways officer here. Other than seeing the technical evidence, which, if I'm honest, I'm not an expert in terms of interpreting. That's why Highways officers are paid to be Highways officers, because they do have that technical expertise, and then they can nicely summarise that for us planners and for the likes of the planning committee and residents as well. The quandary you will then have is, if county do not turn up, we're going to be faced with the same decision, or Alison Holmes may well choose to appeal against on determination. So absolutely, I hear what you're saying. I feel comfortable and satisfied as your assistant director and as a chartered town planner that we have the information we need from county to make that decision, but I understand your frustrations and nervousness. What I will do is I will take that point separately to county. When I have that meeting, I will express your frustrations on your behalf, and I will also ask for regular updates on this as well, and see if we can get some better communications. We also do have a Grantham Transport Strategy Board, which certainly county councillors attend, and some of the officers do attend as well, and I'll ask if we can get updates through that board as well.
Just a point of information, I'm a Grantham County Council, and I've never been to a Grantham Transport Strategy Board meeting in my life.
Thank you for that comment, Councillor Whittington. Just so you are aware, there are some members of the County Council who are on that transport strategy. They have not invited district councils per se to those meetings. I only know because I've recently looked at the report.
As I said, Madam Chairman, as a county councillor for Grantham, I've not been invited to them. So I'm just asking the question, which county councils in Grantham are on it, and which have been excluded? That
is because they appear to have representation rather than complete consultation way forward. now at a point where we... oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Bird.
Yes, thank you. It's just really following up on what we've been discussing. Yes, thank you very much. Emma, if we are putting in strongly worded something to Lincolnshire County Council, could we ask if they do provide a consultation response and within that they refer to an assessment or data or a survey or a study of some sort, that when they're providing the response that they also provide the data evidence, at least in some form, or access to it, because I'm sure there are members amongst us who could read a chart and could look at numbers. I'm sure we'd be quite capable of sort of understanding that. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Smith.
Sorry, this bill's obviously going on for a number of years, and the feasibility study is going on shortly. So presumably we'll have an answer on the feasibility study of the new junction before the bill's complete. If the feasibility study comes back and for some reason the junction can't be put in as planned, or they can't get the third-party land, would there be any way that we could restrict the development?
Not once approved, no, but we have asked that question of County, hence would you like us to restrict the deliverability of a certain number of dwellings before a trigger point basically for the delivery of the junction, and they're comfortable that we don't have that in.
Sorry, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mills.
Yes, well, I think the hook we're on is that we cannot refuse this, and we also cannot penalise the developer. I wouldn't have thought either for this debacle. That would be the only reason I would vote for it. I think we'd have to also explain to our residents, because there's an awful lot of concern about that junction, and the traffic, I don't see that it has, in my own little opinion, declined. I use that junction a lot. It's always extremely busy, and whilst it might have declined if they did a study in COVID or something, but all these roads have got busy again all of a sudden. I think other people might agree with me there. Manthorpe Road's got a lot busier. You see streams of traffic coming in both directions. Nobody can get on or off it. And certainly that Newark Hill junction is not very clever at all. So my only reason for voting for this would be to allow the development to go ahead, but I think we need an explanation for our residents about this.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, and I think perhaps we need to go to the vote after I've spoken. You know, this junction is, we don't want to stop the development, and it's with the projected projects that might come along that then the improvements will take place. Now, if those projected developments come to fruition quicker, then hopefully County will get that junction sorted quicker, because obviously then the statistics will be there that it needs that. So again, I urge you to approve it, because we are in a rock and a hard place, and that's down to County. Thank you.
I believe now we need to move to the vote, unless I do feel, Councillor Mills, that you have had quite an opportunity to speak, unless you're adding any new points at this stage.
It's not a new point, but I'm just adding on to what Councillor Crawford has just said. We don't know yet whether it's feasible to improve that junction with the third-party land issues. So, you know, it's not just a question of time. It is also a question of, can it even be done? On that note, I'll end.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mills. That is actually a very valid point, and obviously that's something that members will need to consider as we now vote. So I will ask all those in favour, please raise your hands.
Is that a yes? 5 for.
Thank you. All those against?
None against.
All those abstaining?
4 abstentions. So I've got 5 votes for the motion, for the recommendation, 0 against, and 4 abstentions. So the motion's carried.
Thank you. And I would just like to add that we did agree to an amendment where condition 7 will require, our officers will require details of a routing plan from Lincolnshire County Council regarding the construction phase, which is to be submitted and agreed with SKDC planning officers, and including the hours as well as the route. Thank you. Thank you all very much for that. I believe we have no other business. Thank you.